let's tack briefly to what seems to be the sine qua non, if I will, of the Republican strategy going into the fall, and that is Benghazi.
I never knew you took Latin.
No, well, I did, actually. I did take quite a bit of Latin. I didn't do well.
Yeah, me neither. I had 2 years of it, man.
The only thing I remember is my sophomore year of high school, my teacher saying two things. One, he started the first class off by saying, "This is not a soliloquy. I want to hear from you." And that was the last we ever heard of that. I don't think that someone had a chance to say anything edgewise in that class for the rest of the year. And then he just kept referring to, if Ford only took Latin, they would have known that Nova in Spanish means no go, and they would have never tried to market that car down in Mexico. That was the only two things I learned. But
that's important. I just learned that a lot of stuff ends with bus.
I don't even remember that.
Okay, go ahead.
Benghazi bus.
That's right. Benghazi bus equals Monica Lewinsky. But we digress. Let's go.
Well, give me your sense of this. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time trying to debunk Benghazi, although that maybe we should do a definitive one here. But the primary problem, it seems to me, is like I don't even know what the conspiracy is supposed to be.
I don't either. And again, they released that, Rice, what's her name, had actually taken the CIA's advice on talking points to use because, there are never talking points provided by the CIA to any other government figure in the history of the world. So clearly that's a huge scandal. No other government figures have been killed in war zones except for like the 20 different embassies that were attacked during the Bush administration. No one's ever screwed up on security or warnings of attacks except for Condi Rice thinking that the August 6th, presidential memo was a historical document talking about how mean Al-Qaeda was, not one when they said Al-Qaeda determined to attack America. It was historical. They were determined a year ago. They're not so determined anymore, except for a month from now when they blow up downtown Manhattan and kill 3,000 people, but let's not investigate that anymore. It's sickening. This is nothing. This is crap. This is what they do. If you read either of the books on Karl Rove, Bush's Brain, or although I can't remember the other one, was it The Architect, written from Slater and Moore, the two great journalists down in Texas. And you'll see that one of the ways Rove turned Texas from a Democratic into a Republican state is he made a good friend over at the FBI, and they gin up fake scandals right before just so they could get the newspaper column, and once they had the newspaper column written, then they had the headlines for TV commercials, and they could run all on scandal, which is the only reason Monica Lewinsky and Whitewater and any of that stuff ever existed. I'm sure Rove was behind the scenes knowing that Bush was coming in 2000 and all the people he talks to in that party. They ginned that scandal up. Sure, they went too far, and it cost them in 98, but it's quite clear that they won the presidency because of it, because it never would have been that close for them to steal it. I mean, obviously, Al Gore had to make the dumb mistake of still not running with Clinton or whatever. But the point is, they caused enough trouble that somebody running on a record of peace and prosperity didn't know how exactly to run because for political reasons, his president had been impeached. This is just what they do, and so in this way, it's perfect. It's a Pavlovian sort of dog type reminder to their crazy people about everything they did to the Clintons in the 90s. So Benghazi equals and going after Hillary, and equals what they did to Bill, and it sort of hamstrings Obama right now, and hopefully gets their people, the crazy people, to turn out and gins up some more stuff in the midterms. But the longer plan here is they know that Hillary Clinton right now would destroy any of their candidates if she were indeed the Democratic nominee, and so they need to damage her in a way that has absolutely nothing to do with politics because they're on the wrong side of virtually everything. So it is absolutely nothing. It is stupid. It's nothing. Like Fast and Furious was nothing. Like the IRS thing was nothing. They're all nothing.
I mean, we'll talk in a second about what a nothing burger this is on some level. But what do you think, in the event that the Republicans take the Senate, what do you think the chances are for this leading to an impeachment push? Because I actually think they are greater than 50%. Because the value, people say that Republicans paid a price for impeaching Bill Clinton. And I'm not so convinced of that. Yes, maybe they lost the House in 98. But the reality is that the
And they didn't even lose it; they just lost seats.
They lost
in the
seats.
House.
The
Didn't lose
electoral
House.
terrain is very different. We have a lot of gerrymandering, and you're right. I don't think that we have George Bush as president if it weren't for that impeachment proceedings.
Oh no! I mean, these guys understand there's a number of ways that have
I don't think
nothing
we
to
have
do with-
repealed Glass-Steagall if it wasn't for the impeachment hearings. I don't think there's a whole mess of things that
That's
I think.
a great point. They pushed Bill Clinton to the right in some ways to try. I mean, yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think the only question of whether Obama is actually impeached if they take the Senate, I think. Well, let's put it this way. Depending upon the numbers in the House and the Senate, the House has to hold hearings and vote. I mean, depending upon what happens in the midterms, if they're in control and in solid control of both, I think the only question that comes here, you need to get, what is it? I think 2/3 of the Senate, so they wouldn't be able to pull that off.
They won't get the conviction
to
in the Senate.
Exactly.
They won't get the conviction in the Senate. In fact, I
Right.
think them knowing they won't get the conviction in the Senate
is better, actually.
Is
They don't want
better
the
for them.
conviction. They
Even
just
if
want the
there's
scandal
Republicans there.
headlines. Yes. So I would say I agree with you. The only way I would disagree with you is if they come to the conclusion that they think that they pushed too far, which I don't think they're going to think last time around, and
No
they
way.
decide, let me finish this thought. Let's not impeach, but let's censure him, and let's just keep pushing and investigating because they're worried the I word might be pushing it too far. Either way, it doesn't much matter. They would impeach him, censure him, because he won't be convicted. What does matter is they will spend all of their time investigating, attacking, and using that to pin to Hillary Clinton, or really, if it ends up not being her, whoever the Democratic nominee is, and then taking a couple points off the top.
Yep.
And that really, in states like Ohio and Florida and a whole bunch of others, it's not New York or California. You take a couple points off the top, you've changed the ball game.
Yep. And
you take a few more points away with voter suppression.
Let me also just I want to just clarify something. My opinion about it pushing Clinton to the right. I don't think that the impeachment pushed Clinton to the right. I think what it did is it made it very hard for the left to actually mount any pushback for Clinton's neoliberal policies, because you're in a very difficult you're in a very difficult position when the Democrat is being attacked for something that's ridiculous, but needs all the support he can get so that he's not actually impeached, to then attack him. I think that's my sense of what happened during that period, so I don't know. And plus, I also think that these guys.
But I also do think that it led a little bit to Clinton to be looking, because he's worried about his legacy. It led him to want to make more deals and get things passed.
I think that's true as well, and I think that same calculus would certainly apply to President Obama.
Seems to have been worried about his legacy since the day before he was elected.
And you're right. It's a twofer, of course, because if you let's say you censure President Obama. We're not going to impeach President Obama over this, because really the blame really lies with his State Department. So who is Hillary Clinton? So it's a real twofer there. And again,
and in a way, you're pulling like what a prosecutor would do. Okay, so we'll knock your sentence down from 15 to 10 years. I mean, in a way, they're negotiating with Obama. We won't impeach you. We'll just censure you. I mean, that's what you've got. That's what you'll have if you do this. I mean, seriously, behind closed doors, I'm sure trade-offs will be going on in that manner.
And I want to remind people that you can become a Benghazi watchdog right now if you go to the NRCC. This is the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, or whatever it is, Republican. And if you add your name to their mailing list, you can become a Benghazi watchdog. And I don't know yet if they're sending out those tote bags or the mugs that I mentioned when I was on Hayes' show the other day, but I think it's just a matter of time.
Wait, is this through Judicial Watch?
No, this is through the NRCC.
Oh, through the NRCC. That's awesome. And I love how one of the morons on the right, and, they're really interchangeable. It's hard to remember all their names, got up on the House and, it was Cotton. It was, from Arkansas, who said, because he's a veteran, so he can say whatever he wants, clearly. Said, the Democrats raised money on the Iraq war, and, how could you be a hypocrite? You see, Mr. Cotton, let's work slowly here for your low IQ, which clearly has been overwhelmed by all the grits. Okay? In this particular case, we're talking about something that you guys are pushing and you guys are running on. In the Iraq War, we're talking about something that you guys pushed and the Democrats ran on to try to stop. Do you understand the difference? The Democrats didn't create the Iraq War to then fundraise on it.
Well, of course.
I know it's a really hard concept for a right-wing brain to understand.
I don't think it's...
Hopefully I went slowly enough there and use small enough words for Tom Cotton.
I don't think it's the grits. It could be the cheese that you sometimes add to it. But let me
grits, yeah.
let me just provide this sort of debunking from the latest smoking gun that they're talking about, which is
the one that could be a mushroom cloud.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that
Sorry.
But I mean, what's not clear here is there's a smoking gun, but nobody has identified exactly what it supposedly shot at. What was the bullet? What was the target? There's just a smoking gun, and the smoking gun is apparently an email that was found under a FOIA act done by one of these right-wing organizations that shows that this guy Rhodes, I think it's Ben Rhodes, who was in the political shop in the White House, sending an email to Susan Rice for her talking points on her visit to meet the press, I think it was, on, I believe, April 16th or 17th, 2012. I'll tell you why I know that date in a second. And the thing says, make sure you emphasize this is a function of the video, the internet video. He's a deputy national security advisor.
Right.
An internet video, as opposed to our policy in the region in terms of these protests. Now, he says protest S. And the reason is, and this is the smoking gun that has to do with Libya, what is left out of every account, any account of what happened on September 11, 2012, it seems to me, that is firmly implanted in my mind, and I know this because that weekend after the 11th, whether it was like the 15th or the 16th or 17th, I can't remember, I hosted up for Hayes, and one of our days was specifically dedicated, the entire 2 hours, to talking about the Middle East with Reza Aslan was at the table, Human Majid was at the table, Eli Lake was at the table. I can't remember who the fourth person was. And I specifically remember a graphic with all of these sort of red flares that signified how many protests were going on that week and that day of the 11th and the 10th, I think it was, and the 12th, around that internet video. They were in, if memory serves me, Morocco, Yemen, Sudan, Egypt, Libya, Algiers, and I believe that even Afghanistan tried to shut down YouTube because they were afraid of protests there. And there may have been others. Algeria, excuse me. And so if you go back to the accounts at that time by the New York Times, by the Daily Caller, by anybody, it all talks about this internet video and how even on the right, what they were saying is disgusting that the president's coming out and having to distance himself from a video. Why should we be kowtowing to these Muslim extremists? And the reports at that time say there's confusion because it seems like these guys may have been like a force that was already organized, but they were attacking the consulate. And remember, they had come over the walls in Egypt, and I think in maybe in Yemen or one of the other countries, had actually come over the walls in other embassies. So the idea that this was confusing is ridiculous. So now the argument from the right is, how dare Susan Rice go on these programs and be told that these protests across the region were a function of the internet video as opposed to our broader policies. And they're conflating that with the specifics of what was going on in Benghazi. And
right.
so I just tell people this so that they are, when their relatives say, but what about the smoking gun from Rhodes? That they can actually respond to it and say, blah, 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 and now you're a nut job. And we're gonna be going through this crap for weeks. And I think the latest is that the Democrats are deciding whether or not they should even participate in these hearings, or whether they should just send one person.
They're stupid.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, you cannot give clown shows like this any bipartisan legitimacy. Democrats should refuse to talk about it on Fox. They should refuse to participate in the committee. Just let it, they can scream and yell on the other side about it, but it needs to be made very clear to the media that this is a clown show and it is a partisan witch hunt. And the only way you can do that, I mean, even with legitimate policy, the Republicans are so much better than Democrats when it comes to something like, Obamacare. They make it a partisan thing. So then all the arguments become about, do you want this liberal policy or do you think the conservatives are right, even though Obamacare was never a liberal policy. It was one meant to be bipartisan. You know what I mean? It changes the way the media covers it. And if Democrats participate in this ridiculous charade, then they're gonna do exactly what the Republicans. That's their Republican plan.
Yep.
Make sure that on the NBC nightly news and places like that, they cover the committee because they're going to want balance and they can show both Democrats and Republicans. Don't give them it.
And I think they should even go further and say, while they're spending millions of dollars on these Benghazi hearings, after we already have like a Senate report, I believe, and probably a House report at this point on what happened there. We've had a series of hearings already on this. They won't hold hearings on long-term unemployed. They will not vote for minimum wage. And frankly, the Democrats have to continue. I mean, we've said this before. They've got to go on and offer more of an agenda, and just completely ignore what's going on, because the only people at this point, it seems to me, who this is going to convince one way or another to vote in the fall is going to be the base of the Republican Party. And there's nothing the Democrats going to say on there that's going to stop
them. If they don't use this to turn out their crazy people, they'll use something else. It'll be Agenda 21, or it'll be the UN, or it'll be Obama's taking your guns, or, whatever. Women and lesbians are coming to abduct your young women and introduce them to witchcraft. I mean, they'll come up with something stupid to turn out the idiot minds and fevered paranoid minds on the right. So the point is to not participate in it. Because once you participate in it, again, that's when it starts making it onto network TV, and that's when it starts becoming something that's legitimate for even talk show hosts to joke about. And that's when it invades the entire culture, becomes bipartisan, and that's when swing voters, even low information ones that don't pay very much attention, start hearing things that lead them to vote in a way they might not otherwise vote. Don't do it. There's no point in it. It's crap. Make it clear that it's crap and that you're not participating in it. Hell, why doesn't the Senate hold a hearing on the still fishy case of the inventory building burning down for Darrell Issa's company to get insurance money that's never been solved? There was a lot of suspects. People who suspected that was arson. Why don't we look into that?
Yeah,
it's just as legitimate as this. Frankly, it's much more legitimate than this.
Well, I mean, at least there was outside investigations, and it didn't get. Obviously, I
know ICE is not leading this particular one, but in the past, he's been such a cheerleader for looking into everything and anything. Why don't we look a little closer into that guy's past? A number of cars he and his brother stole. The times he was busted for illegally carrying a weapon, and the potential arson at his company that helped make him rich. Why don't we look into that? See what we find. My guess is we'd find ICE would probably should be serving time in a very different prison right now than the one he's actually in.
All right. So with that said, hopefully we will not be talking about Benghazi much more. Although I imagine when we start to move into the talk of impeachment, we will end up taking this up again. But I really do think that this is what they're going to hang their hat on. There was a great graph that I think Jed Lewison put up at Daily Kos, which shows that the number of mentions of Obamacare are going down in right-wing media, and the number of mentions, LexisNexis, of Benghazi skyrockets. And this, of course, is coming because, there's all sorts of data now showing that Obamacare, at the very least, is losing its salience as a Republican boogeyman. And so they're not going to be driving people out to the polls. I imagine that this is going to be, we're going to hear stuff of Benghazi over the next couple of months. They're going to bring it back. Right now it's in off-Broadway. They're going to bring it back for a Broadway run in September. And then they'll also be they'll be playing around with a couple other themes.
It's just dinner theater right now.
Yes. I think what we're going to see over like in June and in July and August, we'll see some like regional theater stuff. What else are they going to fish around for? Is there a
It'll
Fast
go on
and Furious
tour,
out
perhaps.
there? Are there? I think they realize that they're not going to get anywhere with marriage equality. Maybe there'll be something else. I don't know what they're going to be tracking down, but who knows?
Hey, maybe they can bring Fast and Furious back again. That was a fun one.
Fast and more furious.
That's right, Fast and Furious. Sir.
Faster and more furious, ladies and gentlemen. That's actually what they should be working into the Benghazi thing. It's faster.
Oh my God.
It's more furious. It's Benghazi Watchdog.
And as Benghazi was going on, Democrats were sitting in a room with the IRS planning to target conservative organizations.
Yeah, I think that one is
They really should combine it all into one big one.
There has to be something else they'll find.